Hello everybody, welcome into my latest live broadcast where it is October the 9th, 2022. It's Sunday. My name is Kerry Holzman and I am doing a rare Sunday broadcast because I was not able to have time last week to do any videos at all. So back here at Studio B, and I'll give you some updates on what's been going on, and I want to go over and revisit the fake solid state drives, typically external solid state drives, that Amazon sells well over 100 of them. I'm sure we could go through and find over 100. And they're constantly being, the sellers are constantly being removed, and then they create new accounts and the whole thing just starts over again. Amazon is really dropping the ball with following any due diligence with regards to vetting out their third-party sellers, and it's unfortunate because it's really harming the Amazon brand. I like to think that when you buy from Amazon, you're buying from a reputable seller, but unfortunately Amazon is allowing people from out of the country who are basically free of any sort of legal ramifications here in the US. And what they're doing is they're gutting a cheap flash drive. They're taking the little circuit board out of it and they're putting it into a generic case. Now I'm going to demonstrate how you can easily identify these on Amazon so you don't become a victim of a scam. The good news is, in every case I've ever heard of, Amazon does refund the buyer's money back to them. However, best to not get caught up in that huge waste of time to process all that, to deal with it. So first, let's just do a check here, make sure everybody can see and hear me okay. The equipment has been off for 3 weeks. There's a lot of updates, so I got a little bit of a late start today. However, hopefully the audio should be nice and clean today, and the video should be super sharp. Let me know how it looks and how it sounds before we get into this too much. We're going to talk a little bit about when you're buying storage, what factor price plays into it, how to identify scam products, and understanding that what you're paying for is basically performance. A lot of times when you see storage of a certain capacity, regardless if it's a hard drive, a solid state drive, a flash drive, an external drive, the differentiator in the price, if the capacities are the same, is the performance. So yes, you can buy a very inexpensive, legit 1 terabyte flash drive for as little as $25, but it will take you a day and a half to fill it with data. Whereas a more expensive 1 terabyte flash drive can allow you to copy a terabyte to it in maybe a couple hours, 2 hours. So what we're dealing with here are cheaper components that can then sell the product at a cheaper price. Now, one of the big retailers and manufacturers who play this little game, which isn't a scam, but you may not be aware of the money you're saving where you're paying for it in time. That's going to be Micro Center. Micro Center has their own brand of flash drives. They have their own brand of NVMe drives, like Inland, I believe, is Micro Center. And the Inland drives are currently on sale at Amazon. And these are your regular NVMe drives. However, you got to look at their read and write speeds. So there's a reason why they sell so much for so much less money than other NVMe drives of the same capacity. The world that we live in, whether we're talking about car racing or we're talking about computers, if you want to go faster, you have to spend more. And it's really frustrating to me when I hear people who are trying to, they're tricking themselves, and they're trying to trick you too, into thinking they're getting away with something with using older hardware, where it is in many cases, a security risk, because they're outsmarting the system by saving money, and what they have is a system that's very slow and insecure and oftentimes incompatible. People trying to make things work, and it wasn't designed to work with older hardware or newer older software with newer hardware too. It goes the other way. So people that are running wanting to install Windows 7 today on a relatively new machine. I don't know what they're thinking, but I avoid those people. I consider that a toxic behavior. That is a downward spiral that only leads down. It only goes one direction, it just spins down. So people are free to do that if that's how they want to squander their precious time here on Earth. That's fine. I don't want to be involved in it because I have a bunch of stuff I got to get done. I charge my customers, of course, by the hour. So if I'm going to do a data backup or a clone or something that involves data rescue, I need to be able to copy the data off as quickly as possible. For that reason, you'll notice I use particular brands over and over for my storage choices, whether we're talking about flash drives like these multiple SanDisk solid USB flash drives, or we're talking about NVMe drives. You'll see I use a lot of Intel, I use a lot of Samsung, I use some Sabrent. I was just playing around with some Western Digital and Seagate. So when we're looking to go faster, we're going to spend more money. Now, just because something has the same capacity at a fraction of the price doesn't mean you're getting a deal. What it means is you're getting less. And if you don't mind getting less, that's fine. I just want to make sure you have a proper expectation. That way, you'll be a happy camper. What ends up happening, though, is people are just, it's like you're buying gas. People are driving around trying to find the cheapest gas. And while you can get away with that in your car, you're not getting away with anything in the computer world. Unless there are certain circumstances where you bought something from somebody who didn't know its value, or they were doing you a favor, or it's a closeout model. And even then, the savings isn't going to be like what I'm going to show you here. We're going to just randomly search around Amazon looking for external solid-state drives, and I'm going to show you immediately how to tell that it's a fake so that you don't have to wonder. Also, if you stick with name brands, so even if you did buy the Inland or the Micro Center drives, they're true capacities and they're real, but they are slow as a dog, and that's why there's so much less money. I can buy about 6 Micro Center 1 terabyte drives for the cost of just one of these 1 terabyte flash drives from SanDisk. This is the SanDisk Extreme. Whereas the Micro Center drive will copy the data around 18 to 60 megabytes per second, or megabytes per second. This little SanDisk will copy around 450 to 500 megabytes per second, and on the low end, in the mid or upper 300s. So the amount of time that it takes me to write data or read data from the drive, assuming I have it plugged into a fast USB port, is significant. Now, for me, it's critical. Time is money. For you, you might have all day. But do understand, when you're watching these sale prices, be aware of who the manufacturer is. Look for reviews on Amazon. If there are no reviews, that's a big warning sign, unless the product is brand new. Go to the manufacturer's website. So in other words, if I wanted to buy this SanDisk flash drive off of Amazon, and I saw Amazon's price was whatever, I could go to Western Digital, who owns SanDisk, and I can buy see the price and buy it directly from Western Digital. It might be cheaper. So we're going to go through all that today. I'm going to demonstrate this for you in real time, and nothing is scripted. Everything is happening just off the top of my head, and it's very easy and it's very natural. Once you know what to look for, you'll identify it right away, so you won't be a victim of these scams. They're really, really obvious. And that's what makes it all the more disappointing that Amazon isn't doing anything proactively about this. I've alerted Amazon now going on 2 years, and I've talked to their product manager. I've scaled this up to different departments in Amazon to make them aware how, well, we may not be able to eliminate all the scam drives out there. There are certain ones, you know, right from the listing right away, those are fake. And furthermore, any seller that is listing a fake product should be banned from the platform. And furthermore, anytime a new seller comes on board to sell their wares, Amazon needs to do a little bit more due diligence in verifying what they're selling is legitimate. Unfortunately, with the millions of products that Amazon carries, they simply don't have the time or manpower, supposedly, to check out and vet out all of their third-party sellers. So it's up to you to protect yourself. At the end of the day, if there's one thing I've learned in life, nobody's going to look out for you reliably, other than your mom and your dad, perhaps. At some point, you realize if you don't look out for yourself, no one's going to, and you're going to have a life of extreme disappointments and uncomfortable, I'd say, a certain kind of pain when you get taken advantage of financially. So we're going to go through that here, but just a moment. I'm going to get a Gatorade before we get started, but go ahead and give me a shout out. Let me know where you are watching from. Sarge Tech, you have removed a message and put somebody in timeout, and I don't see anything they did wrong. So I'm going to ask my friends in blue to don't be so heavy-handed with the button. If somebody's being vulgar or if somebody is clearly spamming, then of course go ahead and time them out. But if you're not in agreement with what somebody says, or you don't like the language they posted it in, you know, if they wrote it in another language other than English, that is not a reason to block or ban or time out somebody. So let's give people the benefit of the doubt. When it's really, really obvious what they're doing is vulgar, at that point you're free and clear to time them out. However, you'll never get me upset by not doing anything. So I want you to think about that before you go to punish anybody in the chat room, okay? Just bear that in mind. Now, Sarge Tech says he thought it was spam. Well, sometimes people will use their username as a means to promote their whatever, and as long as it's not vulgar, as long as it's not adult related, if that's what they want to use for their name, they're welcome to use that for their name. But if they start promoting their own things on my channel without my consent, again, that's something I would deal with. So again, I appreciate, just go a little easy with that moderation today, please. Now, let me go get the Gatorade so I can get started here. A little out of practice. It's been over a week since I've made one of these videos, and I've got to see if I remember how to do it. And I see all our folks here joining us from all over the world, from Aberdeen, Scotland, to Washington State, as well as, let's see, we got folks in Surprise, Arizona, Oldham, UK, Sweden, Newark, Delaware. We also have the Gold Coast, Australia, Asheville, North Carolina, Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I just came back from there, Littleton, Colorado, and we've got folks watching from Wales in the UK and Palm Springs, California. All right, guys, thank you so much for letting me know where you're watching from. As I mentioned, I hope the audio and video are good today. Bebo contributes $4. Right on, Bebo. Thank you for that. Now, I'm going to bring up the Amazon website, and we're going to go through this, like I say, live, unscripted, unrehearsed, and we'll see how many we can find with just a modicum of effort. The reason people are finding them is they're looking for a deal, right? They're going to be looking at that price. People are like, hey, I can get all this storage for this little bit of money. No, you're not. So it's sort of there's a level of greed here, greed on behalf of the scammers who are selling it, and greed on behalf of the people that are buying it thinking they're getting something for next to nothing. Now, there are always exceptions to the rules. Maybe somebody is giving away something next to them, but it's very uncommon, very unusual. and let the reviews be your guide, especially in a brand you've never heard of or cannot identify. So let me go over to this screen here so you can see what I'm seeing. Give me just a minute here, and we'll turn this on. There we go, that looks good. If I turn that on there. Okay, so now here we are. We're at Amazon. And we want to look for, let's say, a 10 terabyte SSD. First of all, you need to know there is no such thing as a 10 terabyte solid state drive. You'll notice when you're looking at flash drives, solid state drives, that their capacities between one drive to another, where we got from where we were, it's all doubled. So back in the day, we had maybe, let's say, 128 meg flash drive, 256, double it again to 512. Then you can go to a gig, then 2 gigs, 4 gigs, 8 gigs, 16 gigs, 32 gigs, 128 gigs, 256. Keep multiplying it times 2. 256 times 2 is 512. 512 times 2 is 1 terabyte. 1 terabyte times 2 is 2 terabytes, times 2 is 4 terabytes, times 2 is 8 terabytes, times 2, 16 terabytes, times 2, 32, 64, 128, just keeps going around in circles, and we're just adding zeros on the end. So when you see solid state drives advertised, or flash drives advertised, it's some weird number like 5 terabytes, 3 terabytes, 10 terabytes. There's no way you can get to that number. There's no technology that existed prior that was half of that. There wasn't a 1.5 terabyte solid state drive or flash drive. Never has been, never will be. It's just not how it works. So let me go back over again, back over to the screen capture here, and let's take a look. Having said that, let's take a look now. Pay attention to the price. This is an 8 terabyte external solid state drive for $869. That seems real to me. We have a 2 terabyte from SanDisk. You're pretty much looking at $100 per terabyte as a fair price. If it's a super high performance, it'll be upwards of $150 to $200 per terabyte for the super high performance stuff. And of course, the USB plug that you're plugging it into on the computer has to be able to support that fast speed. It can't go any faster than the USB port. So if you have an older computer, you're probably not going to have USB 3, let alone USB 3.1, 3.2, etc. Now, let me put my camera on here at the same time. We should be able to do both of these things here so you can see me. I'm going to put the, let me put the camera here. Whoops. Hold on a minute, guys. I'm making some adjustments in OBS, which also had an update. Where am I? Here I am. We'll bring that there. And then I will make myself a little bit smaller, and you should see the Amazon window behind me. Okay, you know what? That should be good. Now, getting back to Amazon search results for, let's say, a 10 terabyte solid state drive. This should be raising major red flags for you. External solid state drive, 10 terabyte, $38.59. Clearly, that's not possible. You couldn't buy the memory chips for 10 terabytes, even if you could get the 10 terabytes for that cheap. You'd be upwards of $4,000 if that were real. Here's another 10 terabyte. So immediately, anybody who's in charge at Amazon of this department could know right away that these sellers are listing fake products. And Amazon's not even paying attention to the reviews. They're allowing sellers to continue to sell despite the warnings of them being fake products. Now, if we're just looking for something more reasonable, right? If you see anything that's 10 terabyte, that's a solid state drive, it's not real. That's completely a scam. So let's just say you were looking for a 2 terabyte SSD. Now, you know what? Let's do it more common. 1 terabyte SSD. Let's do it this way. This company here, this Fangjing, I don't know what this is, and I would be hesitant to buy it, only because I don't know what kind of support I would get if the device has some issue under warranty. You can see it's got a lot of good reviews. It's apparently a real product, but we don't know how long will this last, and what is their customer support like, and how would any warranty be honored. Now, Silicon Power, of course, is a major brand, as is Samsung and Crucial. All of these are all real. But what I want to look for specifically is USB external, because that's usually where we're going to find our fake products. So this memory stick right here, it's hard to say. Pay attention to who the manufacturer is. If you've never heard of that manufacturer, I would be very, very leery. Pay attention also to the prices. At $29.99 for a terabyte, it's possible that that is real, but it would move the data so slow. You'd be in a world of pain if you were copying over a couple hundred gigs. It would take you hours upon hours upon hours, assuming it doesn't fail. That's if it's real. We'll scroll down some more, and these generic drives like this, I would be very leery of them myself. If for no other reason than they're going to be dog slow. I mean, they're saying up to 100 megabits per second. That should be 100 megabytes per second, and no. That is nothing to brag about. 100 is slow by today's standards. We should be getting 400 to 1,000 on a decent device. Like, say, for example, this 1 terabyte Extreme Pro from SanDisk is up to 2,000 megabytes per second, and they actually have the capital B, whereas here they have the lowercase b, which was up here. The lowercase b means bits. There's 8 bits to 1 byte. So if that were actually real, then you'd have to divide that by 8, and you'd be looking at 15 megabytes a second or less. Likely it's just a typographical error. So Kingston and HP, these are all reputable manufacturers, and you can get an idea of what the price would be here. Also, the reviews. Now, when we look at the larger capacity drives, this is where we're going to see a lot of fakes. So here I'm just going to change that 1 to a 2. Again, around $100 per terabyte is a decent price. If you can get it under $100 per terabyte and it's a name brand, it's a good deal. Unless it's really, really slow. So let's take, for example, of course, we know Samsung, we know Crucial, as previously mentioned. We're going to keep scrolling through here. This, I tried one of these Crucial X8s, and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. I can't recommend those drives. Ended up sending that back to Amazon. Again, take a look at these prices. At 2 terabytes at $400, that's extremely expensive. You can get a better drive for less money. Now, these Western Digital Passport SSDs, these are my favorite. Right now, as far as external solid-state storage goes, those Western Digital, whether it's 500 gigs, 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, or 4 terabytes, they never seem to slow down. They never get too hot. I don't know what magic Western Digital has baked into these drives, but it is absolutely my favorite. They are lightning fast, and you can write a ton of data to them, and the amount they slow down as they get hot is very minor. I've seen the cheaper drives absolutely fail. They overheat, and the data just, the copy gets stopped. It says the device is no longer available. So, you know, how important is your data? Now, when we look at just the generic enclosures, you see this one says portable SSD. There's no manufacturer name on it. What we have here is a fake drive. What they have done is they've taken a 32 gig or 64 gig flash drive, a slow one, and they've taken the circuit board out of it. And then they bought this little enclosure, this aluminum enclosure, and they hot melt glue gun the little circuit board and wire it up to the USB 3 connector. And you'll see it goes oftentimes into a USB 2 circuit board. You'll know because there's only 4 wires hooked up to it on the inside. And the inside is all empty, nothing in it. This is a scam product. It's interesting, you will see 4 stars. A lot of these reviews will potentially be fake, or somebody only wrote a little tiny bit of data to test it, didn't actually exceed the true capacity of what's in there. So if they put a 32 gig or a 64 gig flash drive in there, until you hit the 32 or 64, then's when it starts to fail. And there's an easy way you can check using a free software utility called H2 Test W. It's all one word. The letter H, the number 2, the word test, and the letter W. And we'll get more into that. Remind me, we'll get more into that. I want to just keep scrolling through here. Now this is $59.99 for 2 terabytes because it's not a solid state drive. This is a mechanical drive. So it's more prone to failure, and it's going to be snail pace slow. You'll be lucky to get 80 megabytes a second out of that peak. So if you're moving 2 terabytes of data all at once, you better pack lunch and dinner and breakfast for the next day. It's going to take a long time. The good thing about it is it will be consistent. It won't slow down like a solid state drive will do after it starts to heat up. This will run a consistent, 80 megabytes a second, let's just say, which could be faster than your speedy SSD that you bought super cheap that starts out really fast. And then after you move about 300 megs or less, it'll start degrading its performance until it's barely moving data at all. And it becomes like a tortoise and the hare kind of a parable, where the slower drive, when copying a large amount of data, is actually faster than the fast drive copying the same amount of data. That's why when you stick with something like that Western Digital Passport, that'll be done hours before a mechanical drive and be far more difficult to damage it or for it to fail. You can drop it and things like that. You wouldn't want to drop a mechanical drive, especially while it's turned on. So again, if we look at the prices, here's a Western Digital Black NVMe drive, 2 terabytes. All right. This is a high performance drive. You'll see it does up to 7,000 megabytes per second. And we're, like I said, $100 per terabyte is a good price, but you're going to see more than $100 per terabyte on high performance items. It's always the same. If you want a faster CPU, it's always going to cost you more. An i5 compared to an i7 or an i9 or a Ryzen 5 to a Ryzen 7 to a Ryzen 9, this is not rocket science. So as we look through here, we start looking at these generic cases, like this one here. This is a big red flag, 2 terabytes for $31.99. I don't think so. This one here, 2 terabytes or 2,000 gigs, $30.99. No way. It's not real. This is a scam. And we can see these by the hundreds here in Amazon. If we just keep looking generically without a script, I don't know, I'm just typing in, find me a solid state drive of 2 terabytes, and they start popping up. And you're going to see a lot of them are sponsored. So they may pop up first. And that just adds insult to injury. What that means is the seller is paying Amazon to recommend their fake product and put it right at the top of the search results. So you want to watch for the word sponsored next to the listing. So here's one, 2 terabyte portable external solid state storage. Once again, very generic look here, portable SSD, no manufacturers mentioned. $35 is about, well, how many times does 35 go into 200? About 5 times. It's about 20% of the price it should be. That's not because you're getting a deal. That's because that's not really a 2 terabyte drive. So Transcend, they're a real manufacturer. And again, you'll see the prices will align. When you see these prices that are ultra cheap, you should be concerned. This one says it's sponsored. You see how it comes up the very first listing for $21.99. But I think this is just an enclosure, so this is fine. If this had a 2 terabyte drive in it, then that would be fake. But this actually looks real. Even if you see it says Prime, that doesn't mean it's not a fake product. All they do is they ship the fake products to Amazon to warehouse and ship out for them. Amazon doesn't actually know what they're selling beyond what the seller has described to them, and they believe it. External hard drive, 2 terabyte portable hard drive, mobile. So here, this is Prime. It's $20.99. No, it's fake. Again, no manufacturer name on it. Team Group, so Team or Team Group, reputable manufacturer. They don't necessarily make the fastest drives. However, at 1,000 megabytes per second reads, you notice they don't tell us what the writes are. So the write speeds might be snail pace slow. Now, there's going to be a lot of sale prices on solid state drives the rest of this year, more than likely. There's an overabundance of NAND memory chips, and customer demand has gone down. As a result, they're probably going to be selling some of these drives cheaper than it costs to manufacture them. Now, for a long time, we can look at the NVMe drives. I use the Intel 660p, which SK Hynix bought the storage division, the consumer storage division of Intel. So here, you'll see a 512 gig 670p is $47.99. But look here, a 1 terabyte Intel 660p is just $69.99. That is a great price. This is not a speed demon. As far as NVMe drives go, this is as cheap as I will go with regards to performance. So when you consider that, keep in mind if we look up, let's type in Inland, again, keeping the prices in mind, Inland 2 terabyte NVMe drive. They're calling this a performance Gen 4 drive, but the performance drive should be up around 7,000. This is only at 5,000. As a result, it's a little less money. If we scroll down to this Inland drive, is 2 terabyte for $140. Remember what I said, if you can get a terabyte for $100, it's a good deal. And Inland is Micro Center's, as far as I know, it's Micro Center's brand. So that's a good deal, right? No, not necessarily. Do you notice we're not seeing any read or write speeds listed here? That's because this thing is really, really slow. It's about as slow as that Intel drive I just showed you. And you could buy 2 of those Intel drives for pretty much the same price, 2 1 terabyte Intel drives. In fact, if we look up the 2 terabyte Intel 660p, you'll see it's right in this same price range. That's not a great deal. Let's take a look here and see if we can get any read and write speeds out of this. If we're looking at 1800, 2000, that is slow. And here they're saying it's Gen 3, of course. And if we look, like for example here, $79.99 for the 1 terabyte, that's still $10 more than the Intel. And if you ask me if I'd rather have Inland or Intel, I'm taking the Intel drive. Now, if we look at, getting back to that 2 terabyte one, let's see if we have reported speeds listed here. 2,300 megabytes per second reads and 1,800 megabytes per second writes. That's pretty slow, folks, for an NVMe drives, especially now when they're going to 7,000, 7,500. And on top of that, with the PCIe Gen 5 coming out, those storage devices will hit 14,000. So you are getting what you're paying for. This isn't a ripoff, this isn't a scam, but there's a reason why this drive is so much cheaper. Now, sometimes there's a sale. And if you can catch something on sale, like let's take a look at the ADATA. Let me go back up here. ADATA. Hold on, didn't mean to do that. Go back up. 2 terabyte NVMe drive. And I'm just more or less looking at the prices here. This is interesting here. This ADATA drive is 2 terabytes, but look at the speeds. Only 2,100 reads, 1,500 on the writes. That's not a good deal. I mean, it's a fair deal. It's not a great deal. That's nothing you can't get from Intel or from, Inland. It's more or less the same. But ADATA does make performance versions of their drives, and if you can find them on sale, let's take a look. We'll keep scrolling through here. They had the faster 2 terabyte Gen 3 A data drives on sale earlier for $139, and I'm just looking to see if they're still on sale. That's a temporary price reduction. Now, there's a good chance that the prices will continue to go down as we approach the holidays. It just kind of depends if the market remains oversaturated with a NAND memory. Still trying to see if they have that was that A data drive at 139 that was 2 terabytes, and it was relatively fast. Did I go buy it so quickly I didn't see it, or is it maybe just not on sale anymore? So again, 1800 and 1200 is very, very slow. So yes, you can have the capacity but not have the performance. I think this was the one that was on sale right here. This SX8200 was on sale for $139, and you'll see the price went back to $180. At $139, if you catch it on sale, it's a good value. It's fast, it's got decent capacity, and it's good value for the money in my opinion. Let me hop over to the chat room here and see what you guys have been saying, because I can't see the chat room while I am full screen looking at Amazon search results. So let me pop back over there and see what I've been missing. Looks like a couple contributions have come in. Bob R. with a $10 super chat says, I hope your vacation was restful and welcome back. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, well, it wasn't as restful. I was out there looking for Studio C and found a candidate, and it did all I could do while I was out there, and now I have to continue where I left off. I can't do it tomorrow because the banks are closed. It's Columbus Day, but on Tuesday I'll be able to continue moving forward. We'll see what happens. And thank you again, Bob. John Craig with a 10-pound contribution said, let's face it, by buying a major brand, at least you know you're likely to get decent support, even if it costs a bit more. Well, let's talk about support. We're not just talking about, hey, I have an issue like something's crashing. We're talking about, hey, the device is dead, it's not working, and I want you to honor the warranty. There's no warranty that's going to be honored on those scam products. I'll tell you that right now. So yes, when we talk about support in this instance, what we're talking about is the ability to have your warranty honored. These NVMe drives, all universally, I think all have 5-year warranties from the reputable manufacturers. 5 years. But what good is it if you can't figure out who the manufacturer is or how to reach them, or you have to ship the product to China that costs as much to ship it as it does to just buy a new one? You see, people in China can ship stuff here for pennies. Pennies. But for us to ship anything to them, we'll try it sometime. Try and send a small package to China and get a price from your local post office. You'll be floored at how much that costs. But thank you, John. And yes, that's exactly right. You're going to get better support if you need it, which means you have an issue, a warranty, and you deserve a new product. So for example, one of my SanDisk flash drives failed on me. This was a long time ago. It was a 16 gig SanDisk flash drive. I typed in to Google RMA SanDisk flash drive. Takes me right to the RMA page, read the directions, submit the trouble ticket, then they have to authorize it. You don't get to tell them you're sending it back, they have to tell you to send it back. So you tell them what the symptoms are, and if you phrase it all correctly, they won't ask you any questions. Like if you can already say, hey, the thing's dead, it doesn't matter, I tried it in multiple computers, it was working, now it doesn't work anymore. Forget getting your data back. That's a whole different process. There are some data warranties that Seagate will sell or include with certain drives that cost more because you're paying for that. But you shouldn't be having a copy of data, a single only copy of data on any one place if that data is important. So let's take, for example, your birth certificate or your social security card. Ideally, you have that locked away somewhere in case you need it. and you'll have a copy of it somewhere else that might be more convenient for you, and you'll always use the copy unless you have to use the original. You leave the original alone. Well, your data for your computer, whether it's your music, your movies, your documents, your spreadsheets, your photographs, if those are important to you, you need to have copies in 2 locations, preferably 3 locations. And preferably one of the locations being out of the building you're in. Because if your building catches fire, gets robbed, has a flood, a tornado, a hurricane, you want to talk about data loss? One of the things the news doesn't really cover when we're talking about the disaster in Florida, and this happens on every disaster, are the personal losses that are permanent, that insurance doesn't cover, that mean that your precious memories, your photos, it's one thing to get your computer replaced under an insurance policy, but no insurance policy covers your data. How could they? It's priceless. You can't recreate those photographs. So if your data is important to you, you want to have copies of the data in multiple locations, a minimum of 2 locations. Now, whether you upload that to Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive or some backup service like Carbonite or Backblaze, or, I mean, there's lots to choose from when it comes to how to back up your data. But people can't be bothered. A lot of people just can't be bothered. And what they do is they'll put their data on a flash drive and say, there, it's backed up. Well, not if you move the data. If you were freeing up space over here to put over here, you still only have 1 copy of the data. And this could fail just like a light bulb. It can work fine and all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. This can get ransomware, a virus. Things happen to data that if anybody who's ever lost data can tell you they didn't see it coming, they didn't expect it. So the idea here is that if you want to make regular backups of important data, and you've got a lot of data, let's just say, so you need a large capacity drive, whether it's a flash drive, a hard drive, a solid state drive, it's cheaper for you to do it yourself than to upload and pay a subscription. On the other hand, it's not perfect because, again, if somebody steals it, if there's something that happens to the house, fire, theft, flood, natural disaster, if the secondary copy of the data was in the same building, it's still gone. So now you're playing odds. Say, well, what's the likelihood of that happening? So ideally, if the data is important and you have a lot of data, you don't want to spend hours and hours and hours backing up your data. You get a faster drive and you won't be so discouraged. I don't want to back up. It's been a month. I really should back up, but it's going to take forever and just not in the mood for it. Well, that's because you bought a cheap drive. If you bought a more expensive drive, it wouldn't take you so long. You wouldn't be as discouraged. But at the end of the day, it's your loss. You're protecting yourself. I'm not protecting you. Nobody else is going to protect you. If you can't be bothered to put steps in to reduce the odds or mitigate the damage, if it happens, then you have nobody to blame but yourself. And once it's happened, there's nothing anybody can do to help you after the fact that doesn't involve even more money, if it's even possible to do data recovery on, let's say, a failed drive. The amount that it costs is ridiculous. And it takes a long time. It can take upwards of 3-4 weeks to get your data back if it can be recovered. You got to mail the drive into a recovery center. The recovery center puts you in a queue. They're going to take a few days, maybe even longer, to get the data back, let you know if they can get the data back, how much of it they can get back, and then what that's going to cost. And then they need to put that on a storage device for you, which means you're buying a backup drive. So if you were too cheap to buy it now, imagine how much more it's going to cost you if you buy it after you need it. And that's if you're lucky enough that the data is even recoverable. So again, what you choose to do for you is entirely your choice. It's not my job to tell you how you should be protecting your data. But I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't make you aware of the potential consequences of your decisions, whether it's what type of drive you're buying, how often you're actually putting it in use, and how much you value your data. So again, let me scroll back through here, see what else I've missed in the chat. What happens when you try to return one of these one of these fake products to Amazon? Nothing's any different than any other Amazon return. You would simply go to your orders in Amazon, check the box that you want to return that, and pick how you're going to return it. They'll give you certain options for how to return it. It will always go back to Amazon, but it could go through, let's say, a Kohl's store or a Whole Foods or a UPS store or the post office, whatever, right? But it's the same exact return process. Amazon sold you the product, assuming this was like an Amazon Prime item or it was sold through Amazon. Amazon will stand behind it, and once Amazon receives it, regardless of the reason why you're sending it back, that has nothing to do with it. Whether or not the reason you're sending it back is because it's fake, or the reason you're sending it back is it's false advertising, or you no longer need it, you found it cheaper somewhere else, whatever the reason is, the return process is the same. It always goes back to Amazon. Once Amazon receives it, then they initiate a credit to your account or put it back on the card that you used to pay for it. And those options all come up when you go through the return process. Richard Gulcher says he's also noticed data transfer speeds being very slow with cheaper cables. This is especially true with USB 3. Not so much anything before USB 3. But yes, cheaper USB 3 cables can lengthen the amount of time it takes to charge your phone. They can reduce the data transfer speeds, and in some cases can cause harm. Arnold says, I just saved him $79. Put that money towards a reputable brand and save yourself hours and hours and hours of time from getting something that perhaps is in fact truly what it says it is, but doesn't disclose how slow it is. Look, if you have a small flash drive, it's maybe a gigabyte or something, 2 gigs, who cares, right? It's small, you're not gonna write that much to it. But if you're getting something in the terabytes and it's transferring data at such a slow rate, you're going to be discouraged from using it. It's going to tie up that USB port on your computer for hours and hours and hours. Probably could have it run overnight and it'll still be copying if you're moving a large amount of data to it. Some people say, well, I don't move large amounts of data over to my drives, so the speed's not that important. Then I would advise you to not buy such a large capacity drive. Because what that means is if that drive fails, you're going to lose that much more. You're much better off, in my opinion, getting 3 or 4 or 5 smaller capacity drives and then copy your data over to at least 2 of them. The same data copied over to 2 drives. In case something happens to one of the drives, you have another. So it's not enough to have one single backup if your data is important to you. As an MSP, as a managed service provider, I provide my clients the service of backing up their data. Can you imagine if you're paying me, if your company is paying me to secure your data? That means I'm protecting it from viruses, I'm protecting it from ransomware, and if something at your company happens, again, fires, thefts, floods, an employee who sabotages the data because they're upset and they're trying to get revenge, we don't know what the potentials are and why the data will get lost. So what I'm offering is an insurance policy to my clients where I'm backing the data up and I'm taking the data off-site. I'm taking it to my place and locking it up. So if anything happens at their place, I have it at my place. A lot of my clients, they don't trust the cloud. They don't want their data put in some mystery computer out in the world somewhere. They want me to be able to show them where their data is. And since I can't do that with Google Drive or Carbonite or any of the other online backup services, that's not acceptable to them. So I do an old school backup style where I go to the office, I make the backup, and they pay me based on how often they want that backup updated, knowing that if, let's say, I'm doing it once a month, you could have up to a month's worth of data loss in a worst case scenario. But if that means it's saving you 75% over what it would cost to do weekly, that's a business owner's decision to make, pros and cons. So when we're talking about flash drives or we're talking about storage devices, it's not just capacity. It's performance or speed, and it's who's the manufacturer. What's going to happen if the drive fails and you want to send it in for warranty? You likely aren't going to have a warranty on some of these examples I've shown you here on Amazon. And Amazon isn't alone with that. You know, Newegg's got some real fake third-party sellers. They're rampant on eBay. I haven't looked on Etsy, but I'd be surprised if I couldn't find any on Etsy. Wherever people are allowed to sell things like Facebook Marketplace, there are going to be scammers taking advantage of people by offering unbelievably cheap rates for something, and you think, oh, that's a great deal, I'm going to buy it. So pay attention. Reviews, if there are no reviews, that's a big red flag. If there's no manufacturer name or it's a manufacturer you've never heard of, big red flag. And especially if the price is ridiculously low, just know what you're getting yourself into. Know what to expect. Now, when it comes to the testing software that I use, let me go back over to my browser. And I'll bring up Google here. And let's turn on the window capture. There we go. So the software I use is called H2 Test W. I'm just going to Google search it, and it's the very first result on Google. Not necessarily on Bing or other search engines, but on Google, it's the very first search result. So H2 Test W has been around a very long time. It is a free application. It is portable. You don't install it. It defaults into the German language. You just simply select the English button. So you can read everything in English unless you read German. But it's right there on the screen. I've had people ask me, hey, this thing's only in German. How do I get it to English? It literally says right on the screen, English or German. It's on the, you can't get rid of it. It stays on there forever. So it's amazing to me how people are so impatient, they're so intolerant, they don't even read what's right in front of them. The default is German, so you just push the little button for English. You'll see this is freeware. You never are going to pay any money for this. If somebody is selling it, it's not real. And you'll see here, it says Dutch or English. Make sure you select the right target drive, and what it's going to do is it's going to write data to that target drive until the target drive is full. So ideally, you're working with a blank target drive. So let's say I bought a new flash drive. I'm going to plug it into the USB. I'm going to format it, and then I'm going to run H2 Test W. Again, it's an executable program. It's no installation, and I'm going to just go with the defaults. It may give you a warning that the capacity may be a little bit smaller than what's reported. That's normal. That's nothing to freak out about unless it's a massively big difference. But if it's just a small number, it'll give you a warning. That's totally normal. It even will tell you, if you read it, that this is more than likely normal and nothing to freak out about. So let's say we buy one of these fake flash drives from Amazon, and I plug in the plug it in and run H2 Test W on it. It'll start writing files, a bunch of files onto the flash drive. And you'll notice that as it writes, it's giving you the speed at which it's writing. One of the first things you'll notice is right out of the gate, the speed is really, really bad. It'll be slow. And the longer it writes, the slower the speed gets. Once it exceeds whatever the true capacity of the drive is, you'll start getting notices from H2 Test W that it's failing. And if you then go to the Windows Explorer, the yellow folder, click on that, right-click on the USB drive, go to Properties, and you'll see how much data is on it. That's how you know the true capacity. As soon as H2 Test W starts failing, that means it hit the real capacity, which is probably, as I mentioned, 32 gig or 64 gigs. So how do you know the real capacity? Very simply, you look at how much data is on there when H2 Test W started to fail, and that's going to be the true capacity of that drive, not the fake reprogrammed capacity that these folks are, having a 32 gig flash drive report that it's 2 terabytes. It's a very common thing these scammers do. It's overly simplistic. We've seen them where they've taken several flash drives and plugged them into a little RAID array. They'll take a bunch of 32s and plug them in. So now you have like 128 gig, but they'll claim it's a 10 terabyte drive. Open it up and look at it, and you'll see it's just a bunch of flash drives and hot melt glue and soldering. The amount of time they spend creating this stuff just shows you how their time has no value to them. They spend a lot of time doing this. And it's almost all profit, right? The flash drives are dirt cheap. Those little enclosures are dirt cheap there in China where they make them. It costs them nickels and dimes, but it's the amount of effort and labor they've got to put into it to make it seem legit. That's mind-blowing when you see how much work it was for somebody to do that. Now, once you've opened the drive up, Amazon's not going to take it back. So do know, if you intend to send a fake drive, if you're a victim of receiving a fake drive from Amazon, do not dismantle it, because that will, in most cases, void any sort of return option. So just send it back to Amazon if you want a refund. Travis says hello, watching from Decatur, Illinois. Right on. Thanks for joining us. Just looking through your messages here in chat. Do you have any questions so far about, I mean, is there something that you're still confused about regarding the difference between capacity and performance and name brands versus generic brands? When it comes to storage, this is absolutely critical, and from my perspective, very, very basic. Sometimes when you've been in the industry or you're so familiar with something, you might start taking for granted what you assume everybody knows, so we don't have to be condescending and explain every little detail. On the other hand, by not being condescending, by not explaining every little detail, somebody may still be confused because they don't have that background of experience. And none of us were born knowing this stuff. We all learned it at some point. So there's no shame in not knowing. And if you have any lingering confusion or uncertainty regarding what I'm telling you to watch for, please do ask in the chat room and we'll clarify that. Because if you're wondering that, there's a good chance other people watching this video, whether live or previously recorded in the future, will also have that same question and not have the benefit to ask since it's no longer live. Ryan says, have your thoughts changed on Windows 11? I'm still waiting for a reason to use Windows 11. So you let me know if you've come up with any reasons. Because as far as I know, Windows 11 does everything the same as Windows 10. I can't think of anything that I can't do in Windows 10 to justify the installation of Windows 11. Michael wants to know, how was Michigan? He says he just got back from a nice getaway from work, which was wonderful. Michigan started off a little bit concerning because it was very dark, overcast, and rainy the first week. Boy, did it get beautiful. So that second week was totally worth putting up with the first week to be there that second week. It just had beautiful, clear blue skies, perfect temperature outside. Yeah, it was good. It was really good. Thank you for asking. Samuel wants to know, which camera am I using? This is the Canon XF400. I took the giant Canon, the big expensive one, over to Studio A, just in case something happened here while I was gone. And I needed to have a backup camera, if you will. So why not take the most expensive one and move it out of the building? Again, natural disasters can occur. We had a couple of major thunderstorms here while we were in Michigan, and severe winds, the likes of which can tear a roof off or knock down a 80-foot, 90-foot palm tree that can fall on your roof, and there's nothing I can do about it from 2,000 miles away. Plus, there's issues of somebody's watching and they notice, hey, I haven't seen anybody coming and going from that place. I think nobody's in there. There are some wonderful security cameras that I picked up from Amazon. Let me show those to you. Let me go back over to Amazon here. Let's go to, let's see, get back to the screen share. Here we go. This company, AOSU, never heard of them. If they were making storage devices, I wouldn't have bought it. Okay, but these are security cameras, and I don't know how long this company is going to be around, but they have some pretty cool stuff here. They have a doorbell with a camera on it that's completely wireless. Now this is good if you don't want to have to do any wiring, whether it's power or data. So the doorbell here doesn't work. I can't find the transformer for the doorbell. So I can't use the power off of the old doorbell to power a camera doorbell like a Ring. This camera right here has a rechargeable battery in it. And the rechargeable battery is supposed to be good for 180 days. You just simply plug it into a USB port and charge it up. And then it sits in a little holster, if you will. That's the thing you're securing to the side of the door or the side of the, wherever you're positioning it. And it's 100% wireless. I also picked up one of these, I think, is this also from AOSU? Yeah, this is really cool. For the inside of Studio B, I set these cameras up, and what these do, you plug them into the wall, and they can monitor for movement inside of the house. And furthermore, if there is movement, the camera will follow it, which is really, really clever. And then outdoors, we have these security cameras, which again, fully rechargeable. So they say they've got a 365-day battery life. We'll see. However, I mounted them to the outside of the eaves rather than under the eaves. And they got really tested from all the rain and storms and wind we had while we were gone. And these things have an amazing aspect ratio. Like you can see a field of view that's massive. So I can see the driveway, the street, the neighbors' houses, the traffic, people on the sidewalk, or I can see the entire, 3/4 of the backyard. And it'll alert me if it senses motion, and I can even adjust where I want it to ignore motion. Like I don't want it to alert me to people that are walking up and down the sidewalk or cars that are driving by. So I tell it, I just draw like a square around the areas that I want it to, it's called a detection zone. And that anything outside of the detection zone, I don't want it to bother me. The doorbell is really cool because when it rings the doorbell, there's this other piece right here. You plug that into the wall. And these two pieces, they need each other, okay? And this is your doorbell chime in here. It's also what's connecting you to your router. And you set all this up through the phone. It's very, very easy using their app. And just like a Ring doorbell, it enables you to have a two-way communication with somebody at your door. You might say, hey, I'm in the bathroom, I can't come to the door. It even has a voice changer on it. So if you're, let's say, somebody living alone, maybe you're a female living alone, and you want it to sound like a man's voice, you just hit the voice changer, and when you talk, it lowers your voice so it sounds much deeper. Also, there are pre-recorded things. You can have it say, like, please leave the package by the door, thank you, or, your presence. I can't remember what the pre-recorded things are, but they're already done in a manly, booming, forceful voice. And if somebody takes the doorbell camera like they're going to steal it, it will alert you immediately, and it sounds a terrifyingly loud alarm. Same is true with these cameras. They have a light, so if you're looking at night, they're infrared, but they also have a button on the app that turns on a very, very bright light right here, right up here. And they have an alarm that just the whole neighborhood can hear out of that little tiny camera. And what's great is no wiring. It's wireless to the network, and it's wireless. It's got a battery, so I don't have to run power to it. So it's not a matter of somebody being able to unplug or cut power to the house and think the security's off. It's going to be much more complicated than that. And you also, with the doorbell camera, you have this little piece that comes with here. And with these two security cameras, there's a hub. And unfortunately, the hub doesn't replace the doorbell chime, nor does the doorbell chime replace the hub. So in this kit for $230, you're getting the two cameras and this little hub, which you're going to plug right into your router and plug it into the wall. With this camera, you've got this device, which you will plug wherever you want the doorbell chime to be. And that makes the connection. This is sort of the intermediary that communicates between your router to the camera. And this one, in the same way, is an intermediary. And you can buy just if you already have this piece, like let's say, for example, you bought this 2-camera kit with this hub. This hub is all you need for adding more cameras. You just need to have one. And just like this, you need this for each doorbell. As far as I know, it doesn't work with multiples. So you can't buy the doorbell without this, but you can buy the cameras without the hub for that reason. And it's really good prices. You know, $230, you're getting the 2 cameras and the hub. $150 gets you the doorbell camera and the chime. And when they ring the chime, it rings, my phone makes the sound ding dong. So no matter where I am in the world, if somebody pushes that button, I hear ding dong no differently than when I'm in the house. And I can communicate with that person, or I can remain silent and just keep an eye on them. And then of course this camera, $33 for a pan, tilt, zoom wireless camera. It is, all of them are infrared, so you can see at night. And this one has a little micro SD memory card. When the camera faces up, there's a slot underneath here. These 2 pieces are attached, but the camera will face up and expose that little memory card slot, and you put an XC micro SD card in there, and you don't have to pay for storage. That's the other benefit of these. There is a subscription where you can have your storage put into the cloud for security reasons, but you don't have to use it. You can. The devices have built-in memory. I'm trying to remember how much memory the cameras have, like these security cameras. But while I was gone, I don't think it even filled 1/10 of the memory that's built on board. So, never heard of this company. I started with the doorbell cam because I kept missing the UPS guy. It was really upsetting me. I was so impressed with it. I went ahead and got the security cameras. It was super easy to set up. And they give me the battery strength on the app that tells me the battery strength and the signal, wireless signal strength of each device. So when the battery's low, it will alert me, and all I have to do is unscrew them. They very easily unscrew, plug it into a USB plug, charge it up, and then I'm good for however many months it's going to last. Again, they say up to 365 days, depending on your environment, if it's really cold or really hot. Also depending on how active and sensitive you've got the motion detection, where the thing's activating constantly, or if you're using the little flashlight on it to turn on the light at night. These are things going to really eat into the battery life. So 365 days has got to be sort of a best case scenario, I imagine. But I am absolutely blown away by how well these have worked, and they survived the storms with no problem, none whatsoever. All right, let me go back over to chat. Sarge Tech says his door security cam takes a 128 gig micro SD card. I can also see who is at the door and talk to them two-way, and I do not have to be at home. Yeah, exactly. Well, this is all of that. I don't think it's got the ability to add more memory to it, but the memory it's got built in is plenty, at least for me. Just looking through to see if you have any more questions for me. If there's any further questions regarding solid state storage, spotting scams, what to look for, and when you're getting cheap prices, what to expect with regards to how long it's going to take to copy a large amount of data. Trevor says, this is the best video color and brightness and contrast I've seen from your camera. Keep this setup. Well, this is the backup setup. When I get the other camera over here, it's going to get dialed in properly, but I'm glad to hear that you're appreciating the color and clarity and hopefully the audio of today's broadcast. And I always appreciate the feedback. Michael wants to know, what is a good headset with a good microphone for Zoom calls? I'm looking at some ROG Strix headsets. Headsets, anything that involves how something looks, sounds, or feels are very subjective in reviewing. I might not like the way a headset looks or how it feels on my head. You might feel exactly the opposite. For that reason, there isn't really a headset that I recommend, because depending on if you want in-ear, over-the-ear, Zoom isn't that demanding. You can use pretty much a $4 microphone that goes in your ear with a little headphone built in, just a little stick microphone with an earpiece, and that's going to work just fine. When it comes to, a microphone like a desktop microphone, whether it's a Blue microphone from the folks at Blue or something like a Rode Podcaster, any of the Rode products, you obviously are going to get a much better audio quality if you speak right into it. And, some people, they want to use headsets for listening to music as well as using it for Skype or Zoom and things like that. And if that's the case, you'd want an entirely different kind of a headset where you could buy, let's say, a really nice pair of Sennheiser headphones and then just get a little clip-on microphone that's got a little magnetic piece that glues onto the side of your headphones. So you could have these wonderful stereo dynamic headphones that just sound amazing when you listen to your music, and then just attach the little microphone to the side when you want to use it as a headset. You have a lot of options there. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can really recommend because I don't know you and I don't know what your preferences are. But do look at the reviews and look at the designs and see what you find appealing. And if you buy it from some place like Amazon, know that any returns are easy, so you don't have to worry about being stuck with something. And then you can find out yourself what you like. And the only way you're going to know is by trying it. Or if somebody knows you really well, they might be able to recommend something to you. But as far as what's best, I throw away stuff, and then I see people, like I have some bulk items that go out to the curb, and I've seen people drive around the neighborhood going through the bulk stuff, picking stuff out of it, and taking it. So what I was throwing away, somebody else said, hey, I want that. Who's right and who's wrong? Jake in the chat says, I've heard that the higher the capacity the solid state drive is, the faster it is. Is the drive faster because of the capacity or mostly due to the manufacturer using quality components? It's due to the capacity. Solid state drives, if all things are equal, so say for example, we're looking at a particular make and model of solid state drive from a, let's say Western Digital, and they sell it in a 512 gig, a 1 terabyte, a 2 terabyte, everything else being the same other than the capacity, the larger solid state drives are faster. That's just inherent to the way solid state drives store data. There might be a good explanation for that online. Let me just Google that. SSD capacity affects speed. To put it as simply as possible, this is the first thing Google shows me. The more an SSD fills up, the more it slows down. So, no, size does not impact an SSD performance on its own, but it's hard to argue against the fact that a 2 terabyte drive takes a lot more data to fill up than a 250 gigabyte drive. Oh, that's a terrible explanation. Here's a Quora question. Does SSD size affect performance? Some SSD models have 512 gig or 1 terabyte models that offer more performance than the 128 gig and 256 gig models because they made it at such higher capacities they can write to multiple flash chips in parallel. That makes sense. So if you have one chip that represents 512 gigs, it can only write to that one chip. If you have two, think of it like RAID, two 512 chips for a total of 1 terabyte, it can write to both at the same time. So it's increasing the speed by being able to write to multiple memory chips in the device, in the solid state device, simultaneously. It sounds good to me. It's not actually doubling it though. And of course, if the solid state drive has DRAM, that's going to affect the initial speeds that you get as well. Large capacity consumer solid state drives will generally have a longer high speed burst for writing large files, but they may actually be slower in writing smaller files because of the block sizes of the memory chips. So that adds up too, that checks out. See what else we've got going on in the chat room here. Someone emailed me or messaged me wanting to know if a specific router would work better for them. How would I know? Well, would it cover this amount of space and whatever? It's like, well, maybe. It depends on the environment that you're in. So once again, I can have a router that covers my entire house perfectly, put that same router at your house and it only covers half your house. It depends what's in the walls. And where's the router located? If you're putting the router in the middle of the house, you should get equal coverage up, down, left and right, forward and backward. But if you're putting the router somewhere over to the side of one side or the other of the house, then you're obviously not going to get the same coverage. You're just going to be really strong on that side and maybe non-existent on the other side. That's not necessarily a limitation of the router. That's just poor placement on your part. Also, you could be in a building that has a lot of metal in the walls, or an older building where, I can't remember the stuff they used to use before drywall. That stuff can be very difficult to get through, especially if it's got a metal mesh in it. It's effectively like being in a little cage, like a metal shielded cage. And it's going to be very, very difficult to get a Wi-Fi signal into that environment. However, as long as you stick with a name brand router and you're not buying the cheapest one you can find, don't expect much out of a cheap router. If you're looking at a $30 router and you've got questions, I mean, just buy it and see for yourself. You'll take up somebody's time on a $30 router as though their time has no value, I just think it's disrespectful. Now, if you're looking to spend $300 on a router and you've got questions, that's certainly more understandable, especially to the person who's selling you the router. Now, I will say that in some cases, a $30 router might be all you need. On the other hand, you might need the $300 router, but it's hard to know what you need. You are the only one who knows what you need. Otherwise, there has to be an evaluation and an assessment in the environment that you're in and an understanding of how you're going to use it and what you expect from it. You cannot be that demanding and then want to spend $30. It ain't gonna work. So at some point, if you stick with a reputable brand and you see good reviews on it, and again, if you're buying from a place that makes returns easy, such as Amazon, you buy it, you hook it up, you try it. If it doesn't work well for you, send it back. You're gonna have to spend more money likely. These are all problems that money solves, or you could take down the walls or whatever causing the interference in your atmosphere, in your environment rather. It costs you nothing to get a hammer and smash some walls down. Providing you don't take down a load-bearing wall, that'll open it up and get your Wi-Fi signal through. You can also do things like mesh routers and power line, stuff like that. So every environment calls for a different solution, and that's why there's so many options to choose from. But it's amazing to me how some of the people who want to spend the least have some of the most difficult diva-esque, snobby, elitist questions about that little $30 device, and it's preposterous. It's silly. You should know when you're paying so little for something like that, that oftentimes getting answers to those questions, nobody's motivated to answer your question. There's nothing in it for them. They're gonna say, hey man, first of all, how would we know, number one? And number two, buy it or don't buy it, we don't care, it's 30 bucks. How much profit do you think they're making on a $30 router? And they gotta pay for the shipping. There's not a lot of money in it, so they're not gonna be motivated. You're looking at a $300, $500 router, different story entirely. So just bear that in mind. The cheap stuff is great for people who are self-sufficient and know what they want and know what to expect. If you're somebody who is not very comfortable with technology, don't buy the cheap stuff. Don't do it. You're going to be in for some hard lessons. Sylvan wants to know, how do you find the routers, the ones that send the signal through power? A router doesn't send the signal through power. That's done, it's basically a network interface card. And it's just called power line networking. If you go to Amazon and in the search type in power line, one word, networking, second word, and then look at your search results. And those are basically two wall adapters, and they're going to have a cable that comes out of the wall adapter that plugs into the back of the router at one end, and the other wall adapter, you're going to take the cable that comes out of that and plug it into your computer or plug it into another router at that location if you wanted to extend your Wi-Fi that way. It's not as fast. Power line networking is far slower, but if that's what you got to do, it's very affordable and it gets the job done, especially for basic web surfing, email, things of that nature. I wouldn't want to copy over my large video files to a storage device over power line networking. It's going to be a while. It's going to be slow. Michael Dane says, welcome home, back to the heat. Oh, it's actually cooled down here. We're in the 90s this week, so that's good. I'm glad to be out of the hundreds. Hopefully the hundreds are behind us now, and it should just keep getting cooler as we move forward into winter. Sylvan wants to know, will it lose a lot of speed or latency? Latency is not really a problem, but speed would be, yeah. Yeah, you're going to sacrifice speed. Again, you can't be demanding. You can't sit there and say, I want to have high performance networking, but I need to do it through power line. You got to pick one or the other. Or adjust what high performance is defined in your mind as. So if you're in a situation where you get no signal, and your option is you can get a signal with power line networking, it's relatively inexpensive, there's no cabling, you don't have to do, you don't have to demo a wall and run the cables. It's fast, it's easy, and it's cheap. You plug and play, you're good to go. Now you've got a signal. Now, if you want a high speed, gigabit data transfer rates, cut into the walls and run a cable. Just forget Wi-Fi altogether if that's what you want. That's my opinion, and the same is true with power line, Wi-Fi, all of that. If you want it secure and you want it fast, run a cable. Skriaga contributes $2, says, good lad. Right on, thank you for the contribution, Skriaga. John Downey says he uses power line networking for printing. Yeah, there you go, that's a great example, right? Not like a printer is a super high-speed data device anyway, so it wouldn't even be noticeable one way or the other if you were running a cable or doing power line networking to a printer. It'd be basically the same. Printer's still going to print the same number of pages per minute. William Lynn says, did you see my question about SSDs? No, I didn't. It doesn't make any sense to me why somebody would ask me if I saw their question. That makes no sense to me. You need to post your question again, because when you see how the chat moves so quickly, it's very difficult for me to stay caught up, and it doesn't keep all of the previous chat conversation that scrolls off the top. So for me to go back and find whatever your question was might not even be an option for me anymore. If you're asking a question and it's not getting answered, in most cases it's because I don't see it. Or you're asking an inappropriate or personal question, in which case I won't entertain that. But when we're talking about being able to help each other out with answering questions about technology, I certainly want to do my best to provide answers to your questions. And of course, if you're in the chat room and you want to provide answers to people asking questions, feel free to offer up your opinions and give the person asking a choice of answers. My answers aren't 100% the only way. Sometimes my answers are skewed towards a business liability perspective that involves business, whereas somebody else might recommend something I would never recommend simply because I answer all questions to you guys the same way I do to my real customers. You guys just get it for free. If a real customer asked me on how to do backups, and I said, all you have to do is buy this super cheap flash drive and just copy it off, that could come back to haunt me. So somebody in the chat room or somebody on the internet who's just some random stranger answering your question holds no liability to anything they say. And then you can take whatever answers you get and weigh them out into your own personal value system to decide what fits best for you, just making sure that you have all the right expectations depending on which choice you make. My big concern is that people they make choices without fully understanding the consequences of those choices. And then once they learn them, they go, gee, I wish somebody would have warned me about that. So that's all I'm trying to do here. Find Me in Hawaii with a $5 Super Chat contribution. Thank you, Find Me in Hawaii. Find Me in Hawaii says, aloha, Carrie, have a drink on me, Ken Chong. Thank you, Ken. "50 characters only. Is there much of a difference with Cat 8, Cat 7, or Cat 6 cables, even if you have the same internet speeds for each?" The differences in so the Cat 7 and Cat 8 are not really standards that ever caught on. Cat 6, what is it now, 6 something, 6A? That's going to be the cable that most consumers and most businesses are going to use, small businesses. When we get into big corporations and high-rise buildings and miles and miles and miles of cables, then you need cables that can withstand different demands, different environments. So for the average home consumer, Cat 6A, that's all you need. William Lynn wants to know, why does an OEM and I bought cause my laptop to crash blue screen? William, you're going to have to rewrite your question. Always be sure to proofread what you write before you send it. Lawn Dog is saying Cat 6E. I know there was a Cat 5E. Is there a Cat 6E? Boy, it's been a couple of years since I've had to do any cabling, or even the subject's been brought up. So I'm a little, I've forgotten some of it, most of it. I mean, Cat 5 cable for most home users is fine as well. Martin says there's a Cat 6A and a 6E. So you'd have to Google the difference, just type into Google Cat 6A versus 6E, and then see if that difference matters to you. It's very difficult, once again, without knowing what the demands are, what the budget is. It's very difficult to make recommendations along that. For me, I like those really super thin Cat 6 cables that I get over at monoprice.com, and they only make them up to, I think, 35 feet, and they work great. I'm using it in a power over Ethernet situation. A lot of people have given false information online saying that those cables don't work reliably, or that they don't work with power over Ethernet over 10 feet. Explain how I'm able to broadcast if that were true. So again, when you're reading things or hearing from people offering you advice or answers online, consider who they are. If there's somebody you can't determine who they are, then give what they're saying that amount of weight. And then, of course, always do your own verification. Always just bring up Google, type in your question, and then look for a consensus of what most people are agreeing on. That's a good way to sort of guide yourself through an area of which you don't have much knowledge. Look for a consensus. Or if there's somebody you know in that industry that you trust, ask them. Okay, so William's trying again here. Why does an OEM solid state drive I bought cause my laptop to blue screen? When I have a Samsung SSD, it does not blue screen anymore. I have no idea. Problems like that I'd have to see personally on my bench, because I don't know if it's a mistake you were making, or if there may be something wrong with that solid state drive, or that there may be a firmware update to the laptop, or if it's an age difference between how old the laptop is and how old the solid state drive is. In general, the cheaper you spend, the less money you spend, the cheaper the device, the more likely you are to have a problem with it. So when we talk about OEM, that's cheap stuff. If it's OEM, it's cheap. You buy a house and it's got contractor grade windows and contractor grade countertops, that's all cheap crap. It functions, it does its job, but they are not heavy duty, they're not soft close in the case of cabinets, drawers. So the OEM stuff is always the cheap stuff. If you want to go with the cheap stuff, enjoy it. But do know that going with the cheap stuff, ideally, is for somebody who is very comfortable and proficient in whatever whatever category the cheap stuff falls under, right? Like cheap cabinets versus cheap cables versus cheap solid state drives. As a technician, I can buy cheap stuff all day and I can make it work. I'm just paying in my time. So with a problem like what you're describing, I've never seen that before. For all I know, you're coming to a false conclusion. There's some piece that you're missing that you're not telling me. Or maybe what you're telling me is real, but I'd have to see it to verify it. So unfortunately, I don't know, but if anybody in the chat has any suggestions, please feel free to offer up your opinions in the chat. There's our good friend from Norway, Oystein. Oystein contributes 50 Norwegian krona. Thank you, Oystein. Always good to see you. And some good suggestions there to you, William, in the chat room from some other chat participants, giving you some food for thought there. 50 characters only says, what I really want to understand is, will Cat 6A provide faster down and upload speeds as opposed to Cat 5 if my down and upload speeds are the same? So the speed that the cable, the amount of data that the cable can transmit is going to be limited by your internet service provider. Your internet service provider is your bottleneck. Probably a Cat3 cable could perform on your internet service provider. Maybe, maybe not. The bottom line is, for home users, whatever your internet service is, about the best people can get these days is gigabit. So gigabit is, I'm trying to think what that translates to speed-wise. But your internet is the slow part, not the cable. So the answer to your question is no. Those cables won't make any difference to you at all. Even a Cat5 cable, Cat6, Cat6A, 6E, none of that's going to make any difference to your internet speed. It's like if I get my Ferrari and I put it on a residential road, or I put it on a dirt road, what are the best tires to go the best amount of speed? Well, the tires aren't the problem, it's the road. So you're sort of looking in the wrong area. Your internet is going to be based on whatever tier you're paying for. And if you want that to go faster, you have to pay for a faster tier. I would love if internet tiers were being offered that actually would make a difference. That would be a wonderful world. Maybe we'll get there someday, but for now, yeah, the cable's far superior. It can move data, far more data, than your internet service provider can serve you. Here's my friend Ron in the chat. He says Cox gigabit gives me 940 megabits per second. That's correct. When you look at Cox internet service, or there's also Time Warner, Spectrum, Xfinity, any of the cable providers, generally their top tier is going to be gigabit. And your cable that's coming off of your router isn't going to have any impact on your internet speed. Brian Woodley says, Kerry, I'm looking to remove duplicate files from my drives in bulk. Are there any inbuilt Windows programs you can recommend that may do this? Thinking along the lines of a folder flattener. I don't recommend tools that remove duplicate files, and the reason for that is they can remove duplicate files that are necessary. You may not know they're necessary until you've removed them. And when it comes to your own personal data, that should be easy enough for you to categorize and organize your own stuff. Now, when it comes to duplicate file folders, duplicate file and folder software, you definitely should only use that as a guide. You shouldn't be using anything in bulk unless you expect really bad consequences. I strongly recommend that you leave any DLLs that are duplicate alone, that you leave anything in your Windows folder, your program files folders, leave all that alone unless you want to have problems. Ray Burke says, Kerry, I got my and wife's computers backed up after changing each computer's hard drive's names to me and my wife's names instead of desktop. Talked to Begowden on Reddit for help. So if you're using a program like Acronis has a support, online support forum at Reddit. If you go to Google, type in Reddit space Acronis, or Acronis, depending on how you want to say it. You can go in there if you have any Acronis related questions, and the community there they help each other, and Begowden represents Acronis officially and also answers questions officially there at Reddit, and it's all free. Don't expect an answer in 2 minutes, but leave a message, check back in a few hours or the next day, and you should have a response. John Downey says he uses Duplicate Cleaner Pro 5. Yeah, I can't recommend it. Again, I never clean up duplicate files. Again, when we're talking about things like if you're looking for certain multiple copies of the same song, or multiple copies of the same video, or multiple copies of the same photo, That's one thing. Again, I don't even know how something like that could happen, but that's the only thing that I would use it for. I would not clear out anything in the Windows subdirectory, the users subdirectory, or the program files or program files x86 subdirectory, because what you remove may be something you very rarely use, and you may not find out about it for weeks or months, and you'll have no idea why that thing isn't working. You will have long since forgotten about that file removal stuff. Storage is cheap, so I don't know why somebody would care about removing a few kilobytes here or there when, you know, we're getting terabyte drives for under $100. Evangelina says, in the country I live, it's very hard to find RAM and other parts for replacement in old computers. Where would you look for spare parts if a new PC wasn't a viable option? Well, it kind of depends on how important that computer is to you. The idea that a new PC isn't an option, to me, is a very closed-minded perspective that's more willful than realistic. Keeping an old machine alive is often one of the worst things you can do. Even if you could get the parts, you're just, the older a machine gets, the more likely parts are going to start failing, and you're going to have problems with security, and you're going to have problems with reliability, and also performance. So anytime you try to plug in something new, like a new printer or some other new technology, it may not be compatible with that old stuff. And so what you end up doing is you create this vicious circle of trouble that never ends, and all you're doing is buying a few more days, maybe a few more weeks, maybe a few more months. But you will have to replace the machine, or learn to get by without a machine and use something like a phone or a tablet or even a Chromebook, something much less expensive than trying to keep an older machine alive. So my advice to you is, if you're having a hard time finding the parts, that's a message from above telling you not to do it. That's my opinion. Starshine says, Google Drive replaced duplicate files with shortcuts to the original file recently. I'm finding it difficult to tell the difference between the file and the duplicate icons. You should be able to look at the extension. So if something is a shortcut, it'll have a different extension, and you can sort that directory. Like if it's your desktop, you go to the desktop directory and sort by file type, and you're going to see the extensions to shortcuts. Highlight them and remove them. It's super easy. You don't need any software for that. Tech Gamer says, oh, that's the same with keeping an old car alive. It's exactly the same as keeping an old car alive. Yeah, you can be very difficult to find parts. The car's just going to break down even sooner. The older it gets, the more frequently it's going to break down, the less reliable it gets. And before you know it, when you add up all the money you would have bought to keep fixing it every time it breaks, you realize you could have bought a brand new machine if you'd have just gone that way and bit the bullet. So again, it's a different perspective. As a business owner, I would not do that to my clients. I wouldn't want to take the liability on it, and I wouldn't want to deal with supporting something that, you know, somebody's got no money, or they're prioritizing their money to other things they consider more important. There's nothing more frustrating to me than the people who say they don't have any money and they drive a nicer car than I drive, or they wear nicer clothes than I wear, or they smoke cigarettes, or they drink alcohol. Like, all that stuff could be cut out. So it's telling me people have money. They just don't want to spend it on certain things. They'd rather have other things. That's your choice. But to try and get away with something, there's nothing to get away with. It's just, you're going to buy time to prolong the inevitable. And when it's all said and done, you're not making the device worth any more money. You're just throwing good money after bad, convincing yourself that you've made it better. And perhaps you did for a little while. But sooner or later, it's a problem. I mean, if you think parts are hard to find now, imagine you're able to get the parts you want, and you get another 6 months out of the machine. How hard do you think the parts are going to be to find 6 more months from now? So it'll end up costing you a lot more. Can I stick with DDR4 RAM for the next 5 years? I don't know what you can do. I don't know. Maybe. There'll be plenty of machines 5 years from now running DDR4. DDR5 prices are still very expensive. It's not, only now are we getting CPUs and motherboards in mass that support DDR5. It'll be 6 months to a year before DDR5 becomes normal. And eventually the DDR4 is going to get expensive and hard to find in a couple of years, which means maintaining it when it breaks or you want to upgrade it is going to be far more costly than going to DDR5. But what your needs are and how you use your machine and what your machine is now and how much life it's got left in it, I have no idea. That's only a question you can answer. Tech Gamer wants to know if I'd recommend upgrading 32 gigs of RAM from 16 gigs of RAM for gaming. Once again, it depends on the game. It depends on the processor. It depends on the video card. It depends on what your demands are. So I can't answer that question. I don't think anybody can answer that question, not with any legitimacy of useful information that would help you. If there's a particular game you enjoy playing, my advice would be to go to a support forum where people are talking about that game and ask them. And I wouldn't specifically ask that question. What I would ask is, these are my specs. And by that I mean, this is the processor that I have. This is the RAM that I have. This is the operating system that I run. And I want to play this game with better performance. What do you recommend I upgrade to do that? When you already isolate the answer into just about RAM, you've done a disservice to yourself by not allowing knowledgeable people who are familiar with what it is you're trying to accomplish to offer you the solution you're looking for. Instead, you're proposing a solution which may have absolutely nothing at all to do with what it is you're trying to accomplish. So if you're just asking that question, and you literally get the answer that you're asking without any sort of offering up of reading your mind to fully understand what is your system and what is it you're looking to get out of it, because you might already be getting the best performance out of it for that game and for that CPU and for that video card, where the RAM will make no difference at all. On the other hand, it could be a game where the RAM does make a difference, but then so could perhaps the speed of your storage or your processor. So once again, I would go to the support forum for whatever the game is you like the most and ask the people in that forum who are familiar with it, what are some of the best ways to improve the performance on the game, and then tell them what your specs are. RAM, storage, CPU, and operating system. And from that, let people offer you the answer instead of you pigeonholing yourself where you're going to be going around in circles because nobody can read your mind. It's hard to offer you an answer to the solution, an answer to your question, a solution to your problem. Got those two things mixed up when you've not really given us much information. So the answer might be yes, it might be no. There's a lot of variables at play here. I'm not sure, wait, I'm sure my i7 7820X with 64 gigs of RAM and a 1080 Ti would still be enough for quite a few years. And I'm not meaning that I'm having problems with my X299 even if you had it. Again, what your needs are, what your expectations are, what you're willing to tolerate, it's all uniquely you. So if something is meeting your needs and it's not posing a security threat, have at it. Yeah, why fix something if it ain't broke, right? It's very much a situation where sometimes people, they're looking for universal answers, and there aren't any. How we use our computers and how we value them and how important they are in our lives and how much we're willing to spend and how much trouble we're willing to go through, it's very, very individual to each person. If you've asked a question and I haven't addressed it, please go ahead and re-ask it again in the chat, and I'll take a moment to address your questions. We are, about an hour and 50 minutes into this broadcast. We'll probably wrap it up here in the next 10 or 20 minutes. So again, if you have questions for me, even if they're questions where I tell you there are certain things I can't answer, they involve your own personal perspective, your own personal values, that's fine. I mean, that's how we know, right? Don't let those answers dissuade you from asking, because some questions have definitive answers and other questions are going to be subjectively answered based on the values and the expectations of the person asking. Got a little over 300 people watching live right now. It is a bit unusual that I do a broadcast on the weekend, but I'm just making up for last week. Had a fun drive back from Michigan, 2,000 miles. 2,000 miles there, 2,000 miles back. We go from Arizona into New Mexico, into Texas, into Oklahoma, into Missouri, into Illinois, up into the very tippy top of Indiana, and then up into Michigan. And then there's a 3-hour time difference. So crossing over into Nevada, I lose an hour. Crossing over into Texas, I lose another hour. And crossing over into Michigan, at least during this time of year, I lose yet another hour. So that's a little frustrating when I'm driving and I haven't been behind the wheel that long, and I realize that there's a 2-hour time difference, let's say, in Texas. So it's only 11 o'clock for me, but it's 1 a.m. in Texas. And then I'm going to have to still have the same checkout time at the hotel. It means I need to call it an early night. And then, of course, I get those hours back driving back. As soon as I leave Michigan, it's only a couple hours before I'm in Indiana. Boom, I've just gained an hour. And then when I drive and hit New Mexico, I gain back another hour. And when I hit Arizona, I gain back another hour. So I can drive much longer and get those hours essentially back. I can leave Michigan at 2 o'clock, drive for 2.5 hours down to Chicago, and I've only lost 90 minutes. It's pretty crazy. So I'm still a little thrown off with the whole time lag thing. It was getting made fun of for getting up at 11 o'clock in the morning in Michigan, and I'm tired. The guy's like, it's 11 a.m. I'm like, yeah, but it's 8 a.m. really for me. This is 8 a.m. This is early. So now the opposite has happened. Now I've got that 3-hour adjustment where I got used to it, and now I'm waking up here at 8 a.m. Darn it. I don't like to be up before 9 if at all possible. William Lynn says, what do you think about software being compatible with Mac and Windows? Do you get the same features on both systems? There's a version of Office for Mac and there's a version of Office for Windows. They're mostly the same. They have mostly cosmetic differences. However, whatever platform you're using, whether it's Linux or Windows or Mac or Android or iOS, you sort of get accustomed to a particular operating system and its idiosyncrasies in the software, the way the software is developed. And most people don't switch multiple platforms. Most people don't go Mac and Windows. They usually do one or the other. And those who do are generally more technical, and they don't need things to be the same. If anything, they might find it annoying. So, that's what Java was written for, was that you could write in one universal code that would run equally on all systems. Basically, it's really up to the software developers, and the marketplace decides. If people aren't buying it, it's not sustainable. They're going to do whatever it is to make a profit, to be able to have, to meet their salary requirements of their employees, to meet the demands of what the customers want. And there may be features on one platform that are not available on another platform because the cost to implement it could be far more expensive from one platform to the other. So there's a reasoning behind why these decisions are made, and it's all economics. It's time and money. It doesn't do you any good to go through all the extra effort and expense to make it basically universally the same between platforms, where you have to spend more time in development and testing, and it costs more to produce. It's going to cost the customer more. Customer may not want to buy it. Okay, any last questions here? We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We've been on about 2 hours now, and appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I've got a bunch of content coming up. However, I'm also got a lot of administrative stuff I've got to do with regards to the Studio C, and we'll see if I can make that happen. There's a little project in the works, and it can go either way. I won't know for sure probably until the end of the month. We'll find out, and I'll let you know as soon as I know. But in the meantime, appreciate you guys being patient with me while I was on vacation, just trying to unwind a little bit. Really getting burned out there for a while. It was really, my fuse was getting short because I had a lot of pressure to get things wrapped up before I left. And the heat, you know, this 100+ degree weather, it's been miserable. It was so much nicer to go back to Michigan and having normal temperatures, regular weather. And it was definitely medicine that I needed, just what the doctor ordered. So if there's a possibility for me to acquire a Studio C there, I'll be going back and forth is what will happen. However, still a ways away from that, and there's a lot of questions that have to be answered in that regard of having a studio there. Financially, it's very expensive, and I'm not even so sure I can afford it. So that's kind of in the stage I'm at now, is can I afford this? I think what was found is a really good deal, but I wasn't ready. And it's sort of like you have to do it now or that someone else is going to take it. And you know, what's meant to be will be. If somebody else takes it, then I'll just have to start saving up. I didn't honestly think I was going to find someplace out there. I've been looking at listings for the last year. And it's not very often I see a listing that looks ideal in location, as well as the layout of the building and having broadband available. So what were the odds that I'd find something while I was there? I didn't honestly think that was likely going to happen. So my main goal was to just look around some of the neighboring cities surrounding Grand Rapids and the Kent County area, just to see, is that a city I could live in? Is it too far away? Is it too, is it like farmland, or is it more woodsy, or is it snobbish, or is it crowded, or is it loud? So finding a place that's got privacy, nice little retreat, but not too far from the big city, and at the same time being able to get broadband. I've been able to find plenty of places that are private. That's no problem. But they don't have broadband out there. So finding a place that's private and has the broadband available to it, I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of houses over the last year. So while we were out there looking at houses, there was one that was just spot on. So now it's like, okay, I didn't think that was going to happen. Now I got to come up with some money. So that's sort of the part I'm figuring out right now, and still on the negotiation with a final price. That's going to take a couple weeks, so I'll let you know as soon as I know, one way or the other. Look how much you will pay back at the current interest rate. Yeah, the interest rate is 7% right now, but you just refinance the house when the interest rates go back down. It's just a matter of time. So it's not like you're stuck with that interest rate forever. You pay it, for a couple of years maybe, and then you just refinance it when the rates are lower. It's not a big deal. Problem is when the rates get lower, then everybody's buying houses, and then they're going to get a bunch of bids, and they're, offering $50,000 over what the asking price is, and they're paying cash. I can't compete with that. So if raising the interest rates is reducing the amount of competition I have when making an offer, I'm all for it, knowing that as long as I don't have any prepayment penalty, you just simply refinance in a year or two. It's not a big deal. Will there be a Carrie Holzman Halloween special? Not this year, guys, no. But you can watch the previous year's Halloween special. I guess it's been a couple years now. Do I have an opinion on buying a GPU that was used for Bitcoin mining? That's what Sarge Tech wants to know. I don't really think it matters how it was used. I don't know why that would make a difference. I'd be more concerned over the seller's reputation than the card. Threadripper or ARM processor? Depends on your needs, your budget. These processors exist to meet the needs of different people. The budgets of different people, the requirements different people have, the expectations different people have. One is not universally better than the other. It's very much individual decision based on an individual's values, expectations, needs, budget. There's no right or wrong. Murpheus says, Carrie, great to see you back in the studio. A very informative show. Greetings from Cork. Greetings from Cork, Ireland. Right on. Well, thanks for joining us. What do I think about iPhones going to eSIM? You know what? There's pros and cons to eSIM. I don't really care about iPhones. I don't follow iPhone. I'm not interested in iPhones. So we'll have to see if it's a trend that catches on, with Android. Again, pros and cons. There's nothing universally good without bad, nothing universally bad without good in that question. Apple's going to do what Apple's going to do. Whether or not you like it, Apple doesn't care. You can buy the product or not buy the product. Sylvan wants to know, where the RGB cable of the PC you have next to you, would you mind saying where we can get those kind of cables? That's simply an extension cable for the power supply. It's made by Lee, and it's called a Strimer, S-T-R-I-M-E-R. And if you search on Amazon, just the word Strimer, S-T-R-I-M-E-R, should pull that cable and the different cable sets up that Lee makes those, and there's other manufacturers too. It's just nonsense blinking lights. All right, well, it looks like it's quieted down here in the chat, so I'll take that as a hint, and I'll say goodnight. Thanks again for watching. Keep in mind, when you play this video back, it may not be available in HD, nor will the chat play back until YouTube is done processing the video. That can take a few hours to a full day. So quite often, I'm seeing people leaving comments as soon as the video ends, they go to play it back and they say, hey, I'm not getting an HD, or I'm not seeing the chat, because you're trying to play it back too soon. So give YouTube a few hours to process it. A video like this, probably 4 hours or so should be good to go, maybe a little less. It's a little after 4 o'clock in the afternoon here on Sunday, October the 9th, 2022. Yeah, got the year right. And that's true of all live streams on YouTube. This is just universally the way that it works. Thanks for all of the contributions and support. Thanks to all my friends in blue and all my supporters for your patience and understanding while I can take some time off and recuperate and reset and recharge. And we're back at it. Lots more content coming your way. And I'll look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.